Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Oh, Miles here.
Your outpost for the week is freshly delivered, and I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and with me, as she is every single week, the one, the only, Andrea Coffman.
Hello!
Hey, how are you?
I am here and don't sound funky this week, so that's a good sign. I re-listened to something else I recorded for work that week, and yikes. Man, I feel bad for everyone, so thanks for sticking with us through that.
Well, it happens, but we wanted to make sure that everybody got an episode, so... but no, I'm excited to be here, and of course, talk about this chapter 32, The Elder Wand. And before we get to the chapter, of course, remember, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, so make sure you're subscribed so you're getting the show as soon as it drops. And you can find us on Twitter at Join Nerd Party, or on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. We're on Instagram at The Nerd Party. And of course, you can go to thenerdparty.com where you can see everything that we're doing. And of course, you can go over to the contact section and send us an email if you'd like at thenerdparty.com/contact. We've gotten a few emails recently, Dre, of just people telling us that they're really enjoying the show. I always love getting those. It's so much fun to know that people are listening. And we really just appreciate you dropping us a line and letting us know how much you love the show. So really appreciate that. And it's exciting, where I can't believe, we don't really have too much left here. And, it's crazy. So, but Drea, this chapter is a lot of action. I mean, there's just a lot going on. And, so one of the way we start the chapter is the repercussions of Fred's death and not having a lot of time to really deal with that. And so, and them having to try and find a place where they can store Fred's body, so hopefully they can come back to later, because, I mean, this chapter is utter chaos as to what's happening.
Yeah, there's a few instances in this one where I had to read it and then read it and read a few paragraphs or a page down and then go back and do it again so I could make sure I really understood everything that was happening, because there is a lot, like you've said, there's a lot just happening action wise here. I think they don't really let up. You're kind of left with this cliffhanger, and then they don't really pick up from the cliffhanger, it just keeps going. But it was, it was really touching. So we talk about, Fred's body and trying to move it to a place where it can be found. This whole rest of the book differs a lot from the movie. Because in the movie, he kind of, what happens at the end of this chapter sort of happens right after Fred dies in the movie. The series of events just don't quite stack up the same. And just how devastated and how much of an impact that's made on Percy is quite significant here, to the point where he basically is just clinging to this body, won't move, and so they have to sort of hook arms and get it out of the way and get themselves out of the way, because here comes Aragog and his descendants and the spiders and the giants, and this is just pure chaos at this point. I just am imagining Hogwarts is essentially decimated as a building, much more so than it looks like in the movie. We go through a lot that sort of happens here, and a big point here that we missed in the movie is that Hermione actually gets very emotional and curses a Death Eater, and by Death Eater we mean she curses Fenrir Greyback off of Lavender Brown, because he there's another death that we see here is Lavender Brown, and Trelawney is chucking those crystal orbs, the seeing, oh my god, what are they called?
Crystal balls, yeah.
Yeah, the crystal balls, she's chucking those around, and they're doing massive damage too, which is so smart. But yeah, there's just a lot going on, and they are just trying to get to the Shrieking Shack.
Yeah, and this is because, Harry, Hermione tells Harry to look into his mind to see where Voldemort is, because they realize he's not a part of the battle. And Harry does. It's very easy for him to do. And he's able to see that Voldemort is, in the Shrieking Shack. He's discussing things with Lucius, who's, talking about, well, maybe, shouldn't you be out there and fighting and going to look for Potter? And one of the refrains we keep hearing from Voldemort over and over again is that, no, Harry will come to me. Like that Harry, there is no need for me to go look for Harry, because Harry is going to come to me.
Right, and we interpret at the beginning of this chapter it to mean because he thinks he's looking for Nangini, right? Like he thinks he's going to come to him because of the snake. Like
right.
for the better part of this chapter, that's the assumption. Right.
Because at this point, he realizes that Harry is hunting Horcruxes. And he knows that... and he still can't tell that Harry has found the diadem. He thinks it's safe because nobody has...
There's no way. Exactly.
Right. So it's really interesting to see this, and I think one of the things that I was really fascinated by was, again, Voldemort's whole demeanor in this chapter is him believing that he still is going to win because he understands Harry in a way that nobody else does. And I think, it's just really fascinating to be able to see that in some ways he kind of does understand Harry, and yet he doesn't understand just how dangerous Harry is to him. And because he doesn't really know exactly how far this has gone with the Horcruxes. And so, I thought that was really interesting. And he makes Lucius go get Snape because he has a job for Snape. And so we have the trio trying to get to the Shrieking Shack. And running into things. They see Hagrid taken away by spiders. Harry's thinking Hagrid's probably dead. Lavender Brown has died with the attack from Fenrir, and we get Hermione attacking him. We see McGonagall just enraged and in battle, like she's created desks, that have risen up to fight Death Eaters, and like her hair's all undone, and she's like, this is so much more interesting than anything we get in the movie at this point. And them making it to the Shrieking Shack is really interesting too, because we have the whole part from the movie that we never got in book 2, which is or book 3, which is the fact that, you have to hit the little spot on the Whomping Willow to get there. And I love Ron being like, we don't have Crookshanks. How do we get there? And Hermione's like, are you a wizard? And he uses Wingardium Leviosa, which is so fantastic. It's a callback to the original book. And so, there's so much stuff that's happening here that's so great. And then they get to the Shrieking Shack, and they watch this confrontation with Snape and Voldemort, which is really fascinating because Voldemort is not happy with the Elder Wand.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of stuff going on here too. So what's interesting, I think, before we even get to the Shrieking Shack, is you mentioned a couple callbacks. I think I love that Hermione is the one that essentially gives Lavender Brown some dignity, right? Because she's already gone based on how it's written, but she didn't want her to be eaten, right? Because that's just disrespectful. So I think it speaks to the character when you talk about the two opposing sides here, right? It really speaks to the character of all of Dumbledore's army and all the people on the good side, we'll say. They put aside their differences, petty, their rivalries. This is Ron's ex-girlfriend. Hermione obviously could have had feelings about that, but it didn't matter, right? She knew what was right, which was to make sure that Lavender Brown went down with some dignity. And it's just such a small little note, but she could have had any of them do the spell off or, blast Fenrir away, and she chose Hermione. And I think there is intentionality behind that choice. Same with when they are, heading out, they see that Draco is about to be accosted by a Death Eater who he's like trying to convince he's on that side. And Ron saves him this time and is like, that's the second time we saved you. There's like, and then Harry trying to save Hagrid. I mean, like all of the decisions and the way they went, I feel like were very intentional with who was involved in what way. And the fact that when Hermione does her own part, it's in kind of unison with Trelawney, who is also one of her least favorite, least respected professors. So I think there's just a lot to unpack there. It speaks a lot to all of the characters and who they are and what they stand for throughout. And so, they get to the tree, and again, with purpose, Ron is the one who has to kind of cast that spell. And it is hilarious that Hermione kind of calls him out. And then they kind of go sliding. And I think it's really interesting as they go and they start to get to the end, Hermione has to remind them to put the cloak back on. And then they kind of just quietly sit and watch what unfolds for the rest of the chapter, which is it's similar in dialogue or at least in like what the end result is from the movie, but the movie took place in like a boathouse, which I never.
Yeah, it took place in the lake house where the boats
lake house boat shed thing, which I never really understood and didn't make sense to me in the movie. And the Shrieking Shack makes a lot more sense to me because we've also seen Voldemort there before, a couple books ago when he kills the Frank or whatever his name was, the Muggle who kind of like watched over the Shrieking Shack or whatever, like the groundskeeper. So, it makes more sense, right? It has more meaning, more purpose. The Shrieking Shack becomes somewhat of an important fixture in the series now, which we miss in the movie. So, plus they can sneak into it a lot easier. Like they know how to do that. So.
And one thing I wanted to mention too, just as you brought up all the things that are happening with all of the characters, one of the things that we see is, the Dementors come and, we get Luna and Dean, and these other members of the DA that are helping them fight them off because the trio is having a really tough time doing anything right now with what's going on. And in fact, she makes a point of saying, Harry helping them, it's the hardest thing that he's ever had to do when it comes to conjuring this Patronus because he just doesn't have it in him. And, I just love Luna just being like, we're alive and we're fighting and like we're together, like
we're still here, yeah.
Exactly. And so it's a really beautiful moment with that group. And again, it kind of harkens back, of course, to the beauty of, book 5 and them all coming together to fight together. And it's just good. It's good stuff. So, but I mean, the biggest part of this is getting to what happens between Voldemort and Snape, and Voldemort saying that, look, I'm not happy with this wand. And I think the reason is because, I'm not truly the master of the wand. And the only way to truly become the master of this wand is to kill you. And, the whole time we get Snape talking about how, he wants to go find the boy, he wants to help, and everything. And, which is really, an interesting thing, for him to be saying, he's trying to, find his way through. And, I think it's one of those things that it's going to play into everything that it's about to happen. The next chapter is going to explain so much of, who Snape is and what he's been about. And there's a beauty in this moment because, as Snape is dying, and for unexplicable reasons, Harry has no idea why, he goes to Snape And as Snape is dying, he is letting out what we know because of other books, a memory. And he gives it to Harry and says, take it. And, his last words are, look at me. And of course, it's the green eyes of Lily looking back at him, and that is where, we leave the end of the chapter. And it's a really, like, again, there's so much happening in the chapter action-wise with this big, massive battle happening. But we come down to this really key, important moment for the series. And legitimately, the next chapter explains all. It is going to completely change our understanding of this character in a way that honestly, I didn't see coming back in the day. Legitimately.
I think there's so much to that. And I think the interesting part about how she writes this, that I don't know how you could have done it in a movie, even if you could, which is one of those reasons why I love books so much more than I love film, is the whole time this is happening, right? We're seeing the dialogue. We're seeing Voldemort talk to Snape. But what Harry's experiencing is also the rage. He's keeping an even keel. He's saying the right things. He's being almost very politically correct with Snape. But Harry is experiencing this growing rage against the conversation, right? Right before he sicks Nandini on Snape. And that's such an interesting element to hear, because how often do we hear someone say something very even keel and underneath you're going, oh, they must be so angry or so sad or so whatever. And so Harry, because of the connection that I feel like we'll get to, but I feel like the connection is almost deepening with Voldemort throughout all this. Like he's getting to feel and experience what Voldemort's not saying, right? Which is such an interesting approach to this conversation, and that Harry's like, oh, this is not good. This is not good. This is not going to go well, right? And he even at one point asks himself if Snape knows, right? Is Snape aware of what's happening here? Like, can he read between the lines? And you kind of get the impression he's a little caught off guard when he gets killed. I mean, obviously he showed up, and why would you show up if you knew you were going to be killed? But, it's, it's terrifying, and it's, clearly cruel, because they don't even really finish killing him. They just kind of let him bleed out, which is a terrible way to go. Then
he's killed by, being attacked by Nagini too.
It's not we've seen Voldemort kill people with Avada Kedavra. We've seen them kill in much less cruel ways, and this is almost intentionally mean.
Yeah. No, I heartily agree with you. I think it is something to which we, not that we, I think, needed this lesson, but we do show Voldemort's character here.
There's
he
no
is
doubt
intentionally
that he is
cruel as a person.
Yeah, there's just no doubt there is no humanity left in this man, creature, person.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good way of putting it. Creature. Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting how that is playing out and how this whole scene goes, and it feels so much more evil than it does in the movie, because in the movie it's pretty bad, but it's so much worse. And then knowing what we know and what we'll come to know, I don't think I'm going to ruin anything by saying this, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but the fact that you mentioned he really wanted to look into Harry's eyes, I think that was his one last piece, right? That was his sort of parting gift, if you will. That is the last thing he wanted to see before he left was Lily's eyes. And so, that's pretty impactful.
It's going to be really interesting getting to the next chapter, because there is so much that we are about to learn. And I can't wait to get there. This is it. We're coming to the end now. And everything is about to be revealed. And so I am so excited to get to this point. And so, Drea, if anybody wants to catch up with you and talk to you about what we've got coming up next, or just the Harry Potter series in general, or maybe just see what you got going on, where can they find you?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at PCFchick or on Instagram at Drea Coffman, and it's COFFMAN. And I forgot how to spell my name.
And you could find me here on the network doing Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills, as we're talking about Star Wars each and every week. And of course, you can find me over on the TFM network doing so many shows. I'm doing the 602 Club, which is our general geek show, talking about all of the fandoms we love. Of course, talking about the works of Zack Snyder over on Snyder Cuts there in the 602 Club feed. And then also doing The Orb and Literary Treks. The Orb's about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Literary Treks is about the books and the comics of Star Trek. And you can find me all over social media with different things. Just look for the name Matt Rushing 02. So, but thank you so much for checking your Owl Post.
Mischief managed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.